Okay, Amitofo. Welcome to you all. We will start with a vow and the four great vows. Vow, four great vows. I vow to deliver innumerable sentient beings. I vow to cut off endless fixations. I vow to master limitless approaches to Dharma. I vow to attain supreme Buddhahood. Tonight's topic is going to be an interesting one. It's going to be loosely structured around the first Vajra point of the Uttara Tantra Vibhaga. This is the Tibetan name. It's also known by the Ratnagotra Vibhaga, as in reference of the Chinese translated version of it. They're the same. They just have different names. Of course, throughout the years, there's always changes in sutras as they go along. Sometimes it's recension, which is an adding to it, or an extraction from it, or different parts. And some things that started off as a 1,000-line sutra end up as an 8,000-line sutra. But on this particular sutra, this comes from the Tathagata Garbha class of sutra, which is ones that speak of Buddha nature. This is attributed to a Sangha who had this transmitted to him into Sita heaven by Maitreya. Now, these are how it's attributed. Of course, scholars have their own opinions in terms of that and who is the author. It isn't necessarily as important as the content of what is being said. So I'm not going to go into that. Also, I'm not going to go into too much of a scholarly exposition on this. I just want to use it as a vehicle to present the Dharma from, rather than going into it in a line-by-line way with all the different things, because we could take a year to do that. But I wanted to use it as a springboard to show this importance of the three jewels, but the most important being the Buddha. And it's said that of the three jewels, only one of them is real, the Dharma, and the Sangha not being real. Once we get into the issue of what is real and what is not real, what is truth and what is not truth, it gets to be a very sticky issue. It's one that I've said many times that Nagarjuna kind of stood to the side and didn't want to enter into that. And people were thinking he was just taking a safe way of debating. It wasn't necessarily a debate. It was just simply that the words cannot go any further. And it is actually an invitation to explore realization. And this is very, very important, that we have to move beyond an intellectual understanding of this. And sometimes we get caught up in intellectual understandings, and it isn't necessarily helpful once we begin to take sides in terms of this. And we look at things and we say, okay, well, what is this idea, for instance, of Buddha nature? What is it? What is the idea of emptiness? What is emptiness and what is permanent and impermanent? And we begin to start to carve these points, but you might as well as carve them in the ocean. And you take a very sharp sword and carve right into the ocean, and then look and see if it's still there. It doesn't really work that way. And this is kind of what I want to talk to you about, so that you don't get into a concern about that this point is right and that point is wrong, or my school is right and that school is wrong. It isn't in this way. It is in seeking this realization beyond words that's important. Once you do that, it doesn't matter if they say tomato and you say tomato. It doesn't matter. What matters is this true and proper understanding. Once we get that, then we understand what this is about. And we start again, let's start from basics, that everything is created by the mind. So everything belongs to mind in one way or another. Now, if we look at some schools like the Tian Tai school, they will talk about the phenomenal and the noumenon, and those things that are appearing and those things that are intrinsic to mind. And when we see that, it doesn't matter where you're at and what the definition is, whether it's conceptual and unconceptual, conceivable, inconceivable. All of these things are these marks that we put into the water. But what if we could just take that sword, instead of slash the sky, slash a hole in the water? That's inconceivable. But yet it could happen. Not in this particular samsaric arena. It might happen somewhere if somebody has some special skill, but it's not something that is obeys, let's say, the natural laws of this world. But these natural laws of this world are for those destined to live out their lives in this world, and continually going up and down the ladder of samsara. A bodhisattva comes in and knows, okay, I'm going to kind of play it safe. I'm going to straddle the idea of this world and have one foot here and one foot in the absolute. And in this way, carefully balance. And then this body becomes a body as a vehicle for carrying out vows. It's no longer the idea of a self. And when you read a lot of people's commentaries on things and treatises and discussions, they always get caught up. I shouldn't say they always. Several of them get caught up with the words of we or our or I, and my realization or our realization or whatever it is, and they throw themselves back into samsara. And because that's the only place something like a statement like that would be relevant. In absolute emptiness, that's not relevant because it's not applicable except to the dream world. The dream world is temporary. But it is somewhere where Buddhas and Bodhisattvas may reside in, but for a purpose, not simply just to visit here or to enjoy things that are here. I would imagine in the billion or billions of Buddha worlds, there's got to be a better place than this one. At least one better place than this one in all the worlds. I can't imagine they're all kind of this way. I don't know that. It's inconceivable. But the mind itself and its expansion is something that's very, very amazing. But it requires realizations to be able to go beyond our constructs of what we think enlightenment is, what we think Buddha is, what we think emptiness is. So let's take a look at the Uttara Tantra on this particular part and see if that can help us out a little bit. This is the first of the three Vajra points, the three jewels. So the first three, there's 7 Vajra points, and the first 3 have to do with the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Today, we're only going to talk about the Buddha. And it starts, the Buddha is without beginning, middle, or end. So very interesting. They start off very, very much where I left off last week, or was it this week, or the week to come? It's all the same in the Buddha time. It all fits together wonderfully. So this idea of beginning, middle, or end, it's without those. Does that mean that there's no time? There's no, let's say, absolute time with respect to something that, as we talked about last week, something that requires a measurement. How does one measure the Buddha mind or a distance in the Buddha mind? How does one measure a dream or the time in a dream or the distance one travels in a dream? If you traveled in a dream, I would have dreams sometimes. My best dreams were going surfing, but in my dream, I would be at the beach, but I didn't really travel there. But there I was, and I thought it was real in the dream, and it was there, but I really didn't travel anywhere. So this idea of temporal is relative to things that are samsaric or phenomenal. The same with time. Time is something that has to have some kind of a gauge. But if the gauge that we're using is a gauge in a dream, is that valid for us to say that this is really this time, that it's an hour or 2 hours or whatever? This is why I always talk about a Buddha time. And in Buddha time, one is mindful. I'm mindful of my body. I'm mindful that I've got to take care of it. I've got a few more words to say while I'm here and a few more things to do. But it's not one that I'm afraid of the end or anything of that nature. I'm mindful of it. I'm mindful that I have to put this body to good use. But I don't measure myself from the date of birth and the date of death. It isn't in this way. One master was asked, how old are you? And he said, I'm as old as the Buddha. And they go, how old is the Buddha? And he said, he is as old as me. It is just in this way that we approach things. And so if anybody asks you how old you are, you can say as old as the Buddha. Okay, and they go, that's like really, really old. That's at least 2,500 years old. And say, it depends on which Buddha you're talking about. Okay, so we continue. And here they use this anthropomorphic references and gender, which kind of bothers me. But again, these are the translations from the ancient text. He is peace itself. So I'd prefer to say the Buddha is peace and leave it like that. Fully self-awakened and self-expanded in Buddhahood. There's quite a bit going on in this very first line. He's peace, liberation. What we seek, the Buddha is. What the Buddha is not other than you. You already have this. You just muddle it up and fail to see the peace that's there. It's fully awakened. I look at my enlightenment gauge, and it's moved maybe a little bit, but I'm not fully awakened by any stretch of the imagination. This is not the way that we look at things, and nor do we measure it in any way. A lot of times people want to measure this or measure what bhumi they're on or whatever. You don't need to do that. You just need to practice. Don't worry about where you're at in this. Self expanded. So this idea when they're talking about self, it's the self nature or the Buddha nature of a Buddha. So expanded. One of the sutra says if the if something expands this far, the mind expands that far. If it contracts that far. So it is something that is expandable. Why? Because it's infinite. We don't know what infinite means. I mean, if I asked you, what is infinite? And whenever you put your hand up, I'll go, please put it down. Put it down. The moment you start to move your lips to utter a sound, you've lost. But it isn't bad to contemplate what infinite is. But us as a individual cannot understand what that is. Having reached this state, he knows the indestructible permanent path so that those who have no realization may realize. And here again, I don't like the word state here. I would say having reached this realization, because the Buddha mind is not a state. States appear within the Buddha mind. So there's not, oh, I got a Buddha state. It's just simply the true and proper understanding realized that's there, but it is not a state of mind. If we have this kind of a state, then we would be hanging on to the idea of something that might be blissful or happy or fearful or whatever. It isn't a state in this way. He shows the indestructible permanent path so that those who have no realizations may realize. So essentially it's saying that by virtue of this liberation, by its operation, by the nature of the Buddha nature, it engages and has an interest in bringing those to realizations that have not yet had a realization. What is the realization? Is that there is no self, no individual there, not even an individual Buddha. We cannot understand that. But it's something that the Buddha has an interest in bringing people to realizations, and bodhisattvas as well, to bringing sentient beings to realization, so that there is there's not the appearance of suffering in the world, but the appearance of suffering and even the idea of the self are just notions and concepts. We don't understand it from the samsaric side. We don't understand that at all. But when we see it very, very clearly realized that the expansiveness of the Buddha mind, the Buddha realms, that's so infinite. And as it's infinite in this way, it's as if someone rides on a spaceship to the farthest known lights that the astronomers can find. Indeed, at that point, they would realize how vast mind is and how infinitesimally small this world is. But one cannot do that. Even if we fly in the spaceship, we can only get to perhaps the edge of this universe. We don't know, because nobody's really gone out that far. I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime. But in any case, it's something that we have to pause about and see what is there and what is not. Wielding the supreme sword and vajra of knowledge and compassionate love, the Buddha cuts the seedling of suffering and destroys the wall of doubts, along with the surrounding thicket. So here is referring to all of the obstructions, vexations, discriminations that come up, the seedling of suffering, meaning that anything can be the seedling of suffering. If you like ice cream cones, and you're eating them, and all of a sudden, lo and behold, you go to your refrigerator and you realize you ate your last bit of ice cream, or worse yet, one of your kids ate the rest of your ice cream. I think it's actually the reverse with me and my son. But in any case, there's suffering. Something that gives you great joy is suffering. That was the seedling of suffering. Even though there was joy there, all of a sudden it turns around, because we don't understand that. The Buddha, using the Buddha mind, which is even beyond the idea of any kind of a wisdom that emanates from samsara. We talk about this Anyuttara Samyak Sambodhi. This wisdom is really not even a wisdom. It is just the trait of the Buddha mind. This all-knowing Buddha mind, and that's what they're talking about. This Vajra of knowledge. Vajra is a kind of a ancient weapon that had these 5 spokes, and you'll see it like that. And then there's a double Vajra that has the 5 spokes on both sides. That was an ancient weapon, and this one here, they're saying it's a diamond Vajra that can cut through all sorts of ignorance. And so it says that the Vajra of knowledge and compassionate love. And again, here, this compassion is not the compassion of a sentient being and limited to the compassion of a sentient being, but this inexhaustible source of compassion for all sentient beings, even knowing that those sentient beings are illusory. It nevertheless is an appearance in mind. And so let's say if you had an itch on your body, and you ever get those phantom itches where there's no reason that you should be itching, but all of a sudden you want to scratch something. You can't scratch it too much, or else you'll end up with something worse. But you go like, there's nothing there. That you're going like, what caused me to itch there? And it's the same way with the Buddha mind. The Buddha mind has this interest in relieving this suffering, even though that suffering is temporary and isn't really there. It's illusory. Herein is the difficult part, because it's illusory. The sentient being's illusory. So what is the Buddha mind doing? Who is being saved by all of this? The only thing we can say, it is the Buddha mind, saving the Buddha mind. We cannot say that there are individual lives in being that are there, because it is contrary to what the Buddha was talking about, and to the 3 marks of existence. And I'll try to get back to the 3 marks of existence, but meanwhile, you can try to remember what those 3 marks are. It's a trick question. Okay. Being uncreated and spontaneously present. Oh, I forgot. Santha, if you have this, can you put it up so that people can see it? I apologize.
I've already put it there.
Oh, it's up?
Yes. Oh, so did you want me to share the screen?
Yeah, share the screen.
Okay.
That way they can see it. I'm new to this technology, so forgive me if I...
No worries. Give me a moment.
right. Well,
Is that I've shared my the unmarked version. Do you want the marked highlighted version, Gilbert?
no, it's okay. You can do that because I got actually, even if you looked at mine today, it's even more marked up. Can you make it a little bit bigger? So we're on the second paragraph. Okay, that's better. So the next paragraph is being uncreated and spontaneously present. Very interesting. So it's uncreated. It is what creates. The Buddha mind creates everything in the Dharma Dhatu, and it's spontaneously present. What would you think spontaneously present means? Spontaneously present. It's like I always have this kind of a joke I talk about where spontaneously present is like ta-da, and there's the Buddha mind. Boom, it's right there. Ta-da, it's there. It's free of suffering. It's there, just like a real magician. It's spontaneously there. It appears moment to moment to moment to moment. It's there. And it's interacting with everything via its own wisdom, which transcends samsaric wisdom. It's uncreated. It is looking in to mind. So when it looks into samsara, it doesn't see samsara apart from the Dharmakaya. It simply sees samsara as a projection on within mind. This is very, very important because sometimes we want to cut out what is illusory and say, this is not real. And we push this out here, but where's it going to go? I push it far, far. Oh, it's still mine there. Buddha says, I can still see that. Oh, I'll push it out farther. I can see you. I can see as far as your arm. It doesn't have to be pushed out. It doesn't have to be negated. It doesn't have to be existent or non-existent. Those terms of existent or non-existent are only arguments that apply in samsara, and that's why Nagarjuna chose not to talk about whether they're real or unreal. He only presented the two truths of apparent reality, that which is samsaric and constantly changing, like anything that's phenomenal, and that which is the absolute truth. The absolute truth is that which appears in apparent reality is created by the mind. And it doesn't fall out of mind. It doesn't fall out of existence. You could say, well, it was here and now it's gone. But you say, really, is it really gone? Let's rewind and see the Buddha to the very beginning, the very top line. The Buddha is without beginning, middle, or end. So if it's without beginning, middle, and end, and it created everything, then there's nothing to be said to have existed or didn't exist. All of this is using this profoundness to try to be able to approach the idea of the practice in a totally different way, in a way in which we look at things from right view and turning the mind's eye inward towards the idea of that there is, we're using Buddha mind perception. And even the term turning the mind's eye inward is a misnomer because it implies that there is an inward or even intrinsic quality here, but it's as if we said that the ocean has a quality of a saltiness. Wherever one goes, if they're in the ocean, and we'll talk about it as a samadhi ocean, wherever they go, there will be the saltiness there. That is part of the nature of it. It doesn't matter what you do with it. You could go to the North or the South Pole and it can freeze, and nevertheless, it still possesses that saltiness there. It still possesses something there. It isn't pulled out, and we don't purify the ocean by extracting all of the defilements. It is that the defilements are illuminated. Those defilements are there, and the defilements that will come in the future are there too. They're all in mind. And it isn't a sequential way that we process things, although we think this way because of samsara, and we measure everything about from our rotation around the sun or the moon around the earth. And we're setting our clocks to those things. But when we begin to look at it and say, what if all of those things, they all simultaneously are within this dream state? What time is it then? There's only one time, Buddha time. The Buddha is in the present moment. When we look at things this way, it changes the way that we look at the idea of emptiness. And sometimes it's difficult to define these things because people will look at it and say, oh, the samsaric world is empty. But there still is a reality of the absolute mind, which is not empty. And you can paint yourself into a corner, and some schools have done that. And then the schools can argue about whether it is or it isn't. And then they lose the essence of what these sutras are talking about. They lose the spirit of it by virtue of wanting to be right. How can they be right? Only in samsara they can be right. And to them, it matters greatly whether they take this position or that position. The thing is that as we look at things, what matters is the realizations. That cannot be taught. That cannot be advanced as an argument. That's what Nagarjuna in the middle way was telling us. Don't act foolish about this stuff. Pull back, contemplate, and see where you're going. Okay, so then we get to being uncreated and spontaneously present, not a realization due to extraneous conditions. So it's not a realization. It's not something that all of a sudden in samsara, you become enlightened. And then you're given this conferred upon you that you become enlightened by who? I don't know who's going to do that. Maybe some master of ceremonies in the cosmos that will come and confer upon you that you become enlightened and that you've made this. It's not external. It's from mind itself that's there. And in that, so that not a realization due to extraneous conditions, it's due to the lack of space between things, the intimacy of all phenomena with mind and the connection, the interdependency of it, which makes it intimate. Wielding knowledge and compassionate love and ability, the Buddha has the qualities of the two benefits. So it's uncreated and spontaneously present. And if you see things in this way, it changes the way that you look at the world. That's what I want to impart to you today, is not so much going over this line by line to discuss it in that way, but in the way of how it relates to you in the practice. Okay, we go to the next line then. And so the next line, and you can scroll down, Shanta. It says, its nature is without beginning, middle, and end. There is that refrain from the very beginning, timely there, In case you forgot it, they're telling you this is the way it is. It's just Buddha time. Hence, the state of a Buddha is uncreated. Since it possesses the peaceful Dharmakaya, so this Dharmakaya is the mind ground, and it possesses this, and it is this peaceful Dharmakaya. It is described as being spontaneously present. So this peaceful Dharmakaya, what then does that mean, spontaneously present? Is that whatever it does, if it's here as an appearance body and functioning as an appearance body, whether it's the Buddha or a Bodhisattva or a practitioner, it is spontaneously present, meaning that it does what needs to be done to harmonize in that moment in accordance with what needs to be there in terms of the idea that it is the uncreate. When we put our mind to look at everything around us as being part of the Buddha mind, and when we see things in this way, that everything is connected, everything is related by virtue of pratika samappada, cause and condition never fail, then the next thing that happens via body, speech, and mind will be spontaneous. It will come from the Buddha mind itself. And in this way, it will naturally navigate or course through this world. In the Heart Sutra is referred to as the deep prajna paramita. When we're seeing things in this way, it is the deep prajna paramita. You're coursing through mind. When you do that, then there's no difference in your mind and the mind of a Buddha. They're the same. And even if your mind is obstructed, nevertheless, the mind is still the Buddha mind. It is still in this way. We just don't understand that. The difference is that once we understand that everything is created by the mind becomes very spontaneous in terms of what it does in the next moment, spontaneous in terms of blending and harmonizing with whatever state that one is in, and to accord with that state. Okay, we continue on. Since it must be realized through self-awareness, it is not a realization due to extraneous conditions. Again, here comes the refrain saying that because it's realized through self-awareness, this is why I'm always telling you, you always have to be aware. You always have to have this feeling of an expansiveness around you. And an expansiveness is not simply spatial. It's temporal, and it is mindful. It is this mindfulness that isn't this mindfulness of being polite to people or whatever. I always talk about people citing metta on the end of their thing, and being polite and whatever. It is the mindfulness that this very mind that you're using right now is the Buddha mind. You have it. I'm preaching to the choir. Actually, I'm preaching to the pastor because you have Buddha mind. When you understand it, you're utilizing the self-awareness to stabilize this mind that's already complete. It doesn't need to pick up anything, put anything down, but you've got to believe that. You have to have faith in mind, faith in the Buddha, and this will work. I'm approaching this in this way so that you can see the difference between somebody approaching it in a scholarly way and somebody who's approaching it with a great interest in wanting to help others, and this interest in harmonizing and spontaneously presenting something. these three aspects being realized, there is knowledge. Since the path is shown, there is compassionate love. There is the ability, since the mental poisons and sufferings are relinquished by primordial wisdom and compassion. So here we're talking about this primordial wisdom and compassion. This primordial wisdom is the wisdom that predates even all of the contemporary Buddhas. We refer to the Adi Buddha, ADI Buddha, primordial Buddha, and what was there before everything became created. It was this Buddha, and it already had these qualities there in it. It already possessed it. It wasn't something that came up after the fact. And so it says, through the first three, there is a benefit for oneself. Through the latter three, there is a benefit for others. And so essentially what they're talking about, these Vajra points, but in seeing these things in this way, we have to see how the mind works. We understand that this very mind that we use is not different than the Adi Buddha. And to talk a little bit more about that, there is a reference in not only in the Tibetan, but in the Chan school of the five wisdom Buddhas, and I'll probably butcher their names, so I'm sorry, but I still want to mention them. And these are five wisdom Buddhas, and I'll first butcher Chinese. Wuzi Rulai. Did I get anywhere close to that with some of you? Wuzi Rulai, the five wisdom Buddhas. No, I don't see anybody's face. Hold on. So we can go ahead and cut this off, Senpa. We're done with that. So I can see people. So I'm looking at Chinese faces. Did I get that right? Wuxi Rulai, five wisdom Buddhas? No. You guys don't know.
Does anybody, Harry, I've unmuted you. Do you want to say something, or does somebody else want to raise your hand so that you could give the right pronunciation?
Did you say Wusa? I couldn't quite catch what you said.
It could be Wusa. It's here, it's spelled Wuzi, but could be Wusa. So Rulai. So it's the five wisdom.
And Rulai is Tathagata, yeah.
Yeah. So how do you say Wusa? Or is it Wusa?
Well,
Wei Shang, hold on.
Yeah, ask Connie.
We'll go to the expert here.
That's Wu Jur.
That's Wu Shur to you.
Jur with a J.
Yeah,
or ZI.
Five wisdom. Zhi is a wisdom. Five. Wu is a five. So
how do you say Wu Si?
Rulai.
Huh?
Wu Zhi Rulai.
Well, that's exactly how it's spelled here. ZHI. Wu Zhi. No wonder I got it wrong. Okay.
Wisdom.
So that I'm teaching you the references in Chinese so you know them, and so that's Sobaya Ratnasamava, Virachana, Amitabha, and Amoghasiddhi. So these are the five wisdom Buddhas. And then again, they've added, sometimes they'll add an Adi Buddha to that. Sometimes in some schools, they refer to Samantabhadra as the Adi Buddha. So it's kind of an interesting thing. But essentially what it's saying that they represent the five qualities of the Adi Buddha. I don't know what the name is in Chinese for. Do you know, Wei Shan? For Adi Buddha? Maybe not.
I think it's in Chinese. I think we call it Yuan Shi Fu, right, guys? Somebody can post later. 原始 for the original Buddha.
Okay. All right. And then, so let's see how much time I have. I have very little time for this part, but in this particular part, there was a reference here in Tibetan Buddhism, kind of something I was mentioning earlier, of the Shentong school, and they were they had a difference of opinion from the Rangtong school. The Shentong school came from the Mahasangita, very early school of Buddhism. And they, let me read a little bit about it. It said that its adherents generally hold that the nature of mind, the substratum of the mind stream, is empty of all qualities other than inherent ineffable nature. So it's empty of everything other than the fact that it is immutable or not changing, and it has its own nature, which is a Buddha nature, but not empty of its own existence. So they're saying everything is empty, but it's not empty of its own existence. But this seems to could paint a school into a corner by calling it empty in that way of saying it's not empty. Emptiness is not in this way. It should not be defined in this way. Emptiness is not something that's devoid of something. Emptiness we shouldn't even use that word emptiness because it isn't the right word. It is that everything is empty because it's all created by the mind. Everything that appears in the mind, we see the mind ground, and we see the Dharmakaya and the Manakaya, Sambhokaya. All of those are all the same, and they're all fundamentally empty. But it's not empty of something or empty of anything. It's empty by virtue of that. It is the nature of mind, but we cannot define nature of mind samsarically. So then the other school from the Shentong view is distinguished from the Rangtong view of the Prasasangita school. And their view is that all phenomena are unequivocally empty of self-nature without positing anything beyond that. So it is something that essentially saying, from that other school, they're saying that all phenomena is empty, but they don't mention anything about the absolute truth as to whether or not the absolute truth is empty or not. So they kind of rode the train halfway and then kind of got off and realized if they rode it the rest of the way, they'd end up with a Shentong version, but they're not really happy about that. Their answer is because in the emptiness, we cannot define emptiness in words. It's impossible, and it is not a concept. It is the nature of mind itself. And when we try to define nature, it's like if you try to define what space is, and say, what is space? Well, it's just things around me. What's inside your mouth? What is that thing that you release, late at night in your bed? A lot of space. Hacho, is that space too? Is that just gas? So we look at things and we have to see them in a different way. It's very interesting because there has to be a looking at this from a profound realization to be able to look at this and see this and not try to define emptiness from the term of the word. It doesn't work that way. I want you to look into emptiness. I want you to really try to contemplate it because it's important for us to contemplate it. It's important. That's why we call this mind work, is that we want to be able to use mind work in a proper way so that we look into these things, but we don't try to. It's not like solving a koan. If you solve a koan, doesn't mean that you got anywhere. You're still in samsara, and so it isn't in this way. So when we look at that, that's important that we see things in that way. Whether something's phenomenal or the noumenon, there's not really a distinction between them. We understand that some things are impermanent, and then we hold on a second. Let me see one more thing if I have it. I'll have to press this. Very interesting, because this goes to the three marks of existence. And do you remember what they are? Anybody can talk about those? 3 characters of existence. Nobody knows what they are.
It's impermanence, suffering, and not self. Gilbert's muted now.
Say it again.
Impermanence, suffering, and not self.
Has anybody heard it differently? Ian?
The one that I'm familiar with is impermanence, not self, and nirvana.
Yeah, very interesting, right? How many of you heard the one that Eon said? And then the other one. All right, I'm going to take a vote here. Number 1 is for suffering, and the other one, number 2, is for nirvana. How many think the one with suffering is right? Raise your hand. Nobody? 2 people? A few people. All right. How about nirvana? Raise your hand. Okay. And Eon's doubling down. Well, the Thich Nhat Hanh used the one with nirvana, but that's so Thich Nhat Hanhish, because he's very positive. And so he wanted to do something that's very, very positive. So he didn't want to talk about suffering. But isn't it true then they say that suffering and nirvana are not 2 separate things, right? It's like the Sendong school and the Rangtong school. They're not 2 separate things. They're not 2 separate things. The suffering and what you want to code it with suffering to scare people, or you want to put it in nirvana to allure people, they're not 2 separate things. They all belong to mind. And we don't understand that. We say this is the marks of existence, but if we reach for nirvana, we're no better than the ones that are suffering. Because when we don't get nirvana, we suffer. And so it's very interesting how we look at things. We have to look at things very carefully in terms of that. And I was reading something about somebody that was talking about like supporting Thich Nhat Hanh's position and was writing in some forum. And he was saying that that we shouldn't say that if something's impermanent, we know suffering's not permanent. So we shouldn't include it as one of the marks of existence because it's illusory. But then too is nirvana in the manner in which people place it. So it's a matter of how we look at it. I'm not saying either one is right or wrong. It is food for our practice. but we have to look at things very carefully rather than just simply take positions on things. I would rather not take the position things. Sometimes I do, but in some things you have to be able to see things from with the mind's eye turned inward so that we can see it. And even the idea of saying mind's eye turned inward is so bad because it's omnidirectional. But we use that because people can understand that better than if we say it's omniscient in its way. But in any case, what I wanted to do is give you some food for thought using the Uttara Tantra, the very first part of the Uttara Tantra, as a guide as how to practice, rather than just how to read it and try to intellectualize about it, but how to feel it. And that's what Chan is. It's all about practice. All the time you practice. You have to remember to practice, put it into motion moment to moment. You'll see it works. It's very simple if you do it in that way. Okay, I'm going to open it up for questions. Tori, go ahead. She's not unmuted. Go ahead.
Okay, so what I was reading on the screen, the term spontaneously present, how I understand it is that is talking about the concept that there's no actual beginning of how everything happens, kind of like the beginning of causes and conditions. There's not really a beginning. It's impossible to trace it back. So the phenomenon that how it appears, yes, it's causing conditions, but at the same time, it's because it's coming from the mind. So therefore, it's spontaneously present. It just happens. I don't know if my understanding is correct.
It's a little bit different. It isn't as much what I would call happenstance. Happenstance is that it just happens, like somebody throws some dice and whatever comes up, comes up. Even if somebody went to Las Vegas and bet and threw the dice, there is a connection as to what number, what dice show up, dots show up. Everything is connected. And so when it's spontaneously present, it means that it's present in the Buddha mind and present in Buddha time and spontaneously interacting with mind, because all of the characters that are appearing in this puppet show are created by the mind. It is not in the same way as people think of a divinity or a god that would create something, and it isn't in that way where there's a grand puppeteer that controls everything, but everything is still connected in this way, and it's spontaneously doing it by virtue of, if it's a bodhisattva, by virtue of the vows, the Buddha by virtue of the Buddha's inherent wisdom, which is beyond samsaric wisdom. So it is there, and it's spontaneously doing it for a reason. So as long as you understand that there is a reason there and not happenstance, then you're correct.
Okay. Thank you so much.
And then all you got to do is just every day just look around, and the world is your best place to practice. Okay, you see all sorts of stuff, and you'll begin to say, "Oh, I see why this is this way and this is that way." Okay, all right. Let's see. I'll go from the order that's up there right now. Harry.
Oh, yeah. Hi. Hi. Thanks again, Gilbert, for your teaching. I just thought I'd share with you, since I work in a museum, Buddhist museum, we have exhibits of the 5 Buddhas. So there's an understanding of how they work in the Bodhisattva path. And this is actually also how stupas work, with beginning practice with Amagasigi, who's the Buddha of equanimity wisdom, the wisdom of equanimity, and I'm sorry, he's the all-accomplishing wisdom, and he fights against the poison of envy, right? So that's beginning, and then Ratnasambhava is the Buddha of equanimity and fights against pride, and that's also where you develop creativity and resourcefulness. And then with Amitabha, that's discriminating awareness, and that fights against desire. And then once you have, this is all going from the view to the path. And then when you reach Akshobha, who's mirror-like wisdom and fights against the poison of anger. And then finally, Vairakana is the one who is all-accomplishing space, is the Dharma Dhatu itself, and that shows that all of the ones that have come before are empty. So it's a complete path represented through the 5 Buddhas.
And it's a matter of practice. I mean, that's what they represent. Just as we equate Samantabhadra with practice, in general, there are these qualities, and so the Buddhas have these qualities, or in terms of that, they represent that. But all Buddhas have this kind of a quality, and our thing is just simply, as we see the world, and we see it with this non-grasping, non-discriminating mind, little by little, our mind becomes clear, and we're able to see this, and our actions will comport with the Buddha qualities. So it's not like we're trying to become Buddha. We just see via our practice that there's a realization that we're already a Buddha. Of course, we can't walk around and say, people shouldn't say, Gilbert says he's the Buddha incarnate. No, I'm not in that way. It's just that the mind that we use is not separate from the Buddha. So, okay. Thank you, Harry.
Yeah, there's just one other thing. I don't know if you ever heard this phrase. I got it from Robert Aitken in his book, Mind of Clover. It's Shakyamuni only made it halfway.
And he turned around?
And then he turned around, right? It's like when you see the Buddha kill him.
Well, if he feels he's Shakyamuni, then that would be the way. I think Thich Nhat Hanh said, God is God when God doesn't think he's God. So it could be related. Sam?
Hey, Gilbert. Just want to say thank you. This talk was really great, and thank you for reminding us that we do all have this Buddha nature, this potential for it. So I had a question about, towards the beginning of the lecture, you were talking about illusions, and I'm paraphrasing, but I believe you said something along the lines of illusions need not be averted. And my question is that because that would be in and of itself picking and choosing, or is it because facing illusion directly is an opportunity to practice?
Oh, it's clear. The thing is that we see the things from Pratika Samappada. Pratika Samappada is the Buddha mind. So the illusions, they spring from that. So we don't see it as a burden. What we do is see through them. So it is the utilization of the awareness of mind and what they call clear light. The Tibetans use the term clear light to see through all of this. And it's like saying, okay, we're not using, like this color light or that color light. No, we're just have this clear light, and everything is seen naturally as it is. And that's the thing. So rather than a burden, it is your practice field. And so practice here.
I didn't say, I'm sorry, Gilbert. I didn't say a burden. I said averted, like aversion.
I'm sorry, say it again. Oh, aversion.
Yeah, I meant like
Same thing. It's the same thing. Whether I say burden or aversion, it's the same thing. There shouldn't be an aversion to it. We look into it. We see it clearly. Where else are we going to go, right, Sam? I mean, you go, hey, I'm not going to be in samsara anymore. I'm closing myself in, and then when you're not paying the lights go out, So no, we don't have a choice. We can either play the game, and die and be reborn in ignorance, or we can use clear light, and so we meet it head on. Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Thank you. Amitofo, Gilbert. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Jake?
Hi, Gilbert. Thanks. I think I'm going back to the same part of the lecture as Sam. And you touched on something today that I've had a question about for a while, and I guess it might be the right time to ask, but it's maybe the distinction between Buddhism and nihilism. Like, for me to say that I have no self is somehow...
What was the second one? Nihilism?
Yeah, like for me to say that I have no self has to somehow be distinct from saying that my life is meaningless, maybe to the extent that I can deliver other sentient beings from suffering, or, in light of what you said today, to the extent that somehow I'm a projection of mind. And so the illusory self isn't something that I can just throw away. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about this. And in particular, like, what does it mean for me to take the bodhisattva vows? If I'm thinking of myself as this individual who's going to take these vows and come back and be reborn and work towards something, it feels like somehow in my mind, I have that at odds with this concept of no self. And I'm just trying to understand that better.
Well, first of all, Jake, it's natural that you'll have feelings like this, okay? Very, very natural. And the reason you have these feelings is because you're getting closer to where the self is getting nervous. It doesn't want to leave. And it begins to question all of this and say, no, you need me. Hey, I'm Jake, Without you, you're not Jake. What do you want to be? A Buddha? You need me. I'm going to stop breathing. No, next time I'm going to stop breathing and see if you need me or not. It's very clever, the mind. But it's by virtue, Jake, of the fact that you're getting closer, that the mind makes it more that you encounter these obstacles. And so it's like throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and so you're concerned because your mind at this point is becoming a terrorist. It's saying, what good is this? So what are you going to do? You want to do this for the betterment of everybody, hey, don't forget you're Jake, you got a family, you've got a job, or you got whatever, you can't just walk away from everything. And so it brings up all this stuff, but it's good. It's good. Look straight at it. Don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of the practice, but see clearly. See clearly. And it's okay. You don't have to resolve it all at one time. Okay. It's not something, but it's a very strong reaction once one starts approaching the idea of that this world is not as permanent as we thought, or this soul or self is not as permanent. There's a bit of a fright there. That's natural. I mean, it's like how many of you, when you get real close to an edge of a very tall building or something, feel squeamish, right? Or a mountain, you just go, ooh, just, you're frightened. And so it's natural for you to feel that way. And so the thing is, what I would tell you is embrace that, look into that, see who's saying that, what's going on with that, and then see what goes with, in terms of that. Don't be afraid of those arguments, okay? Because what it's trying to do is tell you, you're more important than everybody else, and so you need to be there. But that argument won't hold water in another 100 years. I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt, benefit of the death, but I mean, you won't be here to make that argument. So it's a matter of kind of looking at it and take it slow, take it slow and use reason, and, as it works, work through it. but you should be having these thoughts. I'm not going to say, oh, that's bad for you to do it. No, that's natural. Everything in terms of the practice, because I'm telling you, hey, Jake, I'm not saying completely, but you just might be in a dream, and I'm just saying, look around and see for yourself, and then see what happens with it. Okay. But yeah, it's a good place to be. You should be there right now. This is what you do. This is your own practice to get through this. I went through it myself. I had a lot of doubts of things as I was going through it. Little by little, they were eliminated. From certain realizations and things in practice. And I hope that happens to you as well. Okay, but hang in there. You'll do fine. Okay, Nick. There you are.
Hello, Gilbert. Thank you so much for the talk. One question, I guess, after you mentioned some things about like the Tibetan views, how would you describe Buddha mind? Would you say Buddha mind is empty, or is it kind of beyond all like samsaric limitations of empty, non-empty, or anything like that?
I think Buddha mind is empty of emptiness. Once we start trying to add things to it and talk about that, it's only words, and you have to see for yourself this emptiness from this side, from the samsaric side, looks a lot different than when the mind's eye is turned inward. A lot different. It doesn't have the same relevancy, the same quality, same everything. Yet everything is perfectly in its place, and at rest and at peace. And whether we call it emptiness or at rest and peace or clear light or whatever it is, all of these are just terms of things that are conceivable to us, but ultimately the end game is inconceivable. It doesn't work that way, simply because you're operating in samsara with this 1980 Tandy computer, and the mind is working at ultra supercomputer speed. And so it's not possible for this little computer, that can only play these little video games, Pong, to be able to understand or hold the memory or hold the information that the mind can hold. But can you imagine a mind that has access to everything, from the past, present, future, for all locales, all thoughts, everywhere? How could that possibly be something that could happen? But yet mind, this enlightened mind, is capable of doing that. The Buddha mind. I'm not talking about my mind. When I'm saying my mind being that where it's at right now, but the realizations little by little come, and those realizations serve as proof of that, and it enables you to kind of take a peek at this without going into the idea of dwelling into the emptiness and getting caught in the trap of trying to define emptiness in that way. I do welcome you that you study a lot, and study, from your school, from other schools, about the emptiness, but it's not going to be found in a book. Okay. All you'll do is set the platform for your practice. But the actual practice, then you'll get a realization of emptiness, and you're going to say, no, that's not really what that means. It's so far beyond that. So practice in this way. What I wanted to do and impart to you, Nick, is I wanted to give you something to show you that you've got to carry it. You've got to take it, and don't look for the answer from somebody else or from a book or from a sutra or whatever. We study those, but those are all the expedient means to be able to practice sincerely. And it is a sincere practice and contemplation and clear mind awareness that brings about the realizations. Otherwise, we're just librarians and holding on to somebody else's realizations and knowledge. But you want to be the one that practices. So for you, you need to be patient, and you need to take a step back from all of that and practice what you've been taught. Okay. And it will come to you. It'll come to you because there's a sincerity there. There's a story about the person that went to the master and said, and forgive me if this doesn't represent you, but I just wanted to use this. And they said that how long will it take me to, if I practice sincerely? And the master said 5 years. And he says, what if I practice so hard every day, constantly? And then the master said 15 years. So the thing is that sometimes it's a matter of how we practice, and we hold everything very lightly, like this. And when we meditate, we back it off. In the beginning, we have to hold the method very tight, but later we back it off and just barely hold it. We're just there, just a suggestion of a method. Or as I mentioned to you, a method of no method. See what you can do with that. I gave you some really big homework assignment. So let's see what you can do with that. Okay?
Thank you so much, Gilbert. That's wonderful.
You got it. I mean, you're a sincere person, so it's in this way. Use your intellect for your benefit, not against you. Okay? And little by little, you'll understand what I meant. I sincerely want to bring you along. Okay.
I hope so. Thank you.
Okay. All right. That's it for tonight. Thank you all. And of course, I didn't get to not even 1/5 of what I was going to talk about today. The other 4/5 was pretty good too, but who knows? Maybe it was passed on in one way or another. So thank you. We'll see you next week. We'll see where we go with it. Okay. And then Eon has something next Sunday or 2 Sundays. If you can unmute Eon.
It's this upcoming Sunday, the 21st at 8 p.m. I'm giving a talk for the DDRC's New York branch. They're sort of filtering into New York, and they're having online teachers once a month, and I'm giving a talk on choosing the Buddha this upcoming Sunday at 8 p.m.
You're gonna teach the Dharma?
Well, I hope it looks that way.
Okay. All right. Well, best of luck with your talk. So we're not recording anymore, right?
We still are. There's Matty has a question. Do you want to answer Matty's questions, Gilbert?
I want to go offline first because I want to keep the recordings to a manageable amount of an hour.